you go to tell the story and then you can't imagine that it turns into, the guy who had freaked out this whole congregation walks in while we're doing the interview, and then that really became the story.
That's Mark Stebnicki, video producer for the North Carolina Farm Bureau and a killer storyteller. If you're new here, my name is Jacob and this is the To Create is Human podcast. Currently we are in season 2, which is all about storytelling and breaking down the art and science of story. Recently I've been starting every episode with what's called the story bite, which is just a key storytelling tip in under 60 seconds. Today's story bite is actually a lesson that I'm learning right now as I'm writing a short film that I'm about to produce. Really excited for it, but it's just, you shouldn't have to over-explain something to your audience. We like to think that in order for my audience to understand one thing in this story, they have to understand 40 things, but the beauty of, in my case right now, a short film is that your audience can use their own story to relate to this guy. You don't have to make it the most detailed backstory ever. A short film is usually one moment in time played out, one choice, one thing that's changed, somebody doing one thing different than they've done before, right? It's easy for me to say I have this huge idea, intricate backstory, several characters. I just need to stop over-explaining and give my audience a little more credit than I have in the past. Instead of getting an exposition dump, which is essentially just giving a lot of information that doesn't actually move the story on. Focus on who is the main character, what does this person want, and what are they doing to get it, what's in the way of that. That's all you should need for a film. So that's today's story bite. I hope that was under 60 seconds. Let's get you into the guest, Mark Stebnicki. Oh, also, real quick, we recorded this episode, probably back in March now, and it's June. So Mark, I'm sorry for getting this episode out this late. And just for anybody else who's wondering, we're talking about any events that happened in March. That's why it sounds like we're talking about them as if they were yesterday. Life's been crazy. I'm getting it out now. Better late than never. Here you go. I'll start by asking you this, Mark. What does the word story mean to you?
I think about people when I think about story, and I try to think of kind of the person's life and like who they are in day-to-day life, like that person's overarching self, what they are Monday through Friday. I know within that there's different pieces we can take out, like we're assigned to do different stories, maybe at places we work on like a piece that has happened in that person's life, but I still think it comes back to who the person is, how they've grown up, what their background is, and just kind of what they do week in and week out, really.
And when you're telling your stories through video, which is the same format that I do my storytelling through, what is the main goal that you want your audience to take away from these videos?
Really going back to who that person is, trying to have told their story, again, whether it's on just kind of, I don't know, like a little slice of their life or like something small or big that they've done, still trying to tell who that person is. And just always asking those questions, why they do things. I'm trying to think of a good example. Like there's a story we did in the mountains with a trout farmer, and we went out there just thinking we were going to tell a story about mountain trout in North Carolina and kind of the ins and outs. And we get out there and the guy's, really kind of gruff farmer, just does his thing. He's done for decades and he's really kind of buttoned up and, what do you want to know? And just tell us the procedural things. But once you get into the question, just simply, why do you do it? Those 4 words, he just broke down in tears. And it was the most interesting thing to see someone come in so buttoned up, arms crossed, just a little gruff, and then ask what you would think is the simplest question. And that's where you get the waterworks, which is not what we're not going out there saying, oh, I'm going to get this person to cry and try that. But I mean, right. Ultimately, you need to ask why they do it. It's kind of a basic question, you think, but then I think that kind of hits them the hardest, and they reflect on all the things they've done to get to where they are and maybe generations that are going to take it over and that sort of thing. So that's always interesting to see reactions to that question.
That is awesome. Yeah. And that kind of answers another question that I had told you to prepare for is, what is like, how do you deal with subjects that are just really hard to, what am I trying to say? How do you deal with subjects that have a hard time coming across as natural on camera? The subjects that they freeze up, they tense up, they're like, big cameras and lights and microphones are in my face. And that is a very interesting question to ask. I don't know if I've asked that as many times as I probably should to my people that I'm interviewing, because I think you're right. There is a level of, okay, yeah, why do I do this? And then you're taken back to where you started and everything. Do you ask that on every shoot? Is that something that you guys recently have started doing? Asking why they do what they do?
I think it's kind of become a theme after that story, and I do have to correct myself. Why do you do it? 5 words. I said 4. Anyway, that's going to bother me if I don't correct myself. But
You're good.
no, I think after that story, it kind of prompted like, let's get into an interview and see where it goes, and then kind of ask that question at the end or whenever it feels appropriate. I go out with a producer who's kind of set up the story, and she writes the story for me before I edit. And then we also go out with our boss, who's plays like the reporter basically, and asks the questions and things. So us 3 as a team, we'll talk about things riding up to a story and how we're going to handle it. Typically, when we show up, I think you should just get out, no gear, go talk to the person for a little while, kind of get the lay of the land. If you're not on some major time crunch, I know sometimes you really just got to get to it, task at hand. But I mean, just get out like a person. And, typically I'm telling farm stories. So we're out on someone's property at their house. So you just want to come up to them as a human and, just kind of see who you are, exchange pleasantries, kind of get a feeling on their energy. The people that feel like they may need some more warming up, maybe I'll take a little longer setting up so my other 2 people in the crew can kind of talk with them and just loosen them up. And you can kind of get a gauge on how and when to start a conversation. We can also start shooting video for the story before an interview if they really feel like they're going to need some time. One of the first things to do, though, is put a mic on them, I think. After you've kind of introduced yourself and gotten a lay of the land, if you can mic them up just to get those kind of real interactions. If they're going to be talking with family members or other people that work on a farm. I'm giving a lot of farm examples because that's the stories I'm telling right now are on North Carolina farms. But yeah, getting a mic on someone and, even shooting from a distance with a longer lens or longer focal length, to a point where they may forget they have it on, and you'll just get like really natural interactions with people.
I love that. And the biggest reason that I brought you on as a guest to this podcast, I mean, you could say, are counterparts as far as we both work as video producers for Farm Bureau Federation. I'm in Idaho, you're in North Carolina. We jump on these calls every month, and we do show and tell. We show each other some of our work and whatever. And for the past like 3 or 4 months, I've just been really heavily inspired by like specifically not just the story that you told, but like how you told it. And the video that I'm thinking in particular of right now, 2 of them actually that I can think off the top of my head, is the one where you introduced that lady to farming, but you didn't just have her tell you what it was like the first time that she drove a tractor. Like you started off saying, the very first thing you hear is, have you ever driven a stick shift? She's like, And then you show both audibly and visually, I can see and hear this lady nervous, excited, trying something new. There's a lot of storytelling choices that only you, I feel like, could have made in that particular instance. It's a lot more effective I think than just saying, sitting the lady down afterwards and being like, yeah, I've never done this, but it was cool. Like I tried it, it was very eye-opening to me to say, because a lot of the videos that I do, we do them every year, they're yearly things, and you got to figure out how to make them unique and how to make them different and exciting, both for you and for the viewer. Because I think we both know if we're not excited doing them, maybe the viewer can't feel that a lot, but maybe they can sometimes.
So that story was in Henderson County, North Carolina, which is far out west, apple country. And this is a as you said, like you get a lot of stories that you have to do every year. It's kind of a prescribed thing. I think we're the same in that aspect that there's a lot, you
Mm-hmm.
have to do. Luckily, we're really agriculturally diverse. So if you go out west, you will see a lot of different things than kind of the middle of the state or the coastal part of the state where we go a lot of times. But yeah, a mountain apple farm, that's, it's always going to look good on camera, on drone. Like it just looks fantastic. And this particular story was a teacher who was a part of a fellowship learning about the life cycle of apples, how they plant them, how they grow them, how they harvest, how they sell. So just the complete life cycle of apples. And this
Mm.
kind of goes back to the miking a person up early thing, because this was all before the interview, the little tractor sequence you're talking about. Right when we got on site, she was super personable, bubbly girl, excited to do the story with us. So already you're like, that's a win. You want someone motivated and excited to be on camera instead of having to kind of warm them up and shape them and things like that. But getting a mic on her, and then the farmer she was with, we know really well. So we kind of knew the outline of the day where she was going to practice picking up crates of apples, and then she was going to pick apples, and a few other things, and then do the interview. But yeah, that first sequence of her learning to drive a manual tractor was that just kind of happened on site. That was not necessarily planned to be in the story. But it was a perfect it was a perfect start to the story. And I do have to give credit, our producer Jamie Thomas, she writes the story, so I will get a script after she logs the interview and kind of puts the sound bites together. But then I get total creative freedom of, natural sound sequences, video choices, music selection, and all that. So it is a team effort, but it is awesome to get the creative control of, music and shot selection and that sort of thing.
Dude, that is awesome. I think some of my favorite moments in my films are come from the stuff that is least expected. But if I were to go back on some of my favorite films that I've done, both for Farm Bureau and outside of Farm Bureau, it comes from the times that I'm like, it was definitely not the planned stuff. Is some of my favorite stuff, I should say.
Exactly. Yeah, no, and I think we can get caught up too in trying to have, a perfect setup and perfect framing and perfect lighting and all that. But sometimes you got to let the real moments play out, even if you weren't quite set and you're, a little shaky or slightly out of focus. Like people will still appreciate seeing those real moments rather than, more of a planned out shot, I think.
Exactly. And this goes hand in hand with that other story that you shared just this last meeting where I can't remember, I don't remember the name of the person or the name of the story, but it was this, was it the tobacco seeding? Was that what
Yeah,
it was?
seeding a
With the
tobacco
water?
greenhouse. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. And I remember part of the interview, my favorite shot of the whole interview was where you actually pointed down into the water and reflected back up at the interviewee instead of, the standard, which is nothing wrong with standardized shots, the wide, medium, tight shots, right? But I appreciated the break in normality, and you just show a little bit of, hey, look down at the water, happened to see this shot, I got the shot. That was one of my favorite moments of that whole, again, very well told story throughout the whole thing. There are a lot of spots I could compliment in that video, but I appreciated that just little break of,
Yeah.
I don't know what you'd call it, the technical term, but yeah, I appreciated that.
No, that was, I appreciate it. That was one of those unplanned things. I really had just set up kind of a wide shot of him with all the action behind him where they're seeding the greenhouse and floating the trays out in the water. And then our producer, who was asking the questions that day, asked him, how many gallons of water does it take to fill these things up? And I'm just, kind of looking down at the waterbed and see his face in it. So it was nothing planned. And I stopped her like, hold on, I got to reframe. Like this will be awesome. So I just tilted I didn't have to move or anything, camera position. I just tilted down just enough to get his face. And it was one of those magic moments. Fun one. I appreciate you noticing.
So now that we've talked a little bit about the stories that you've told and you as a creator and an editor, I'd love to hear some of the stories that you are drawn to or inspired by outside of work or within work as well. But what are some of the things that inspire you? I'd love to tap into that a
Yeah,
little bit.
no, That's a good question. I really, and I think I found this love when I got into local news, and it's like going out each day to like a really rural part. But like I've always lived in a city. That's kind of just where I've been born. Not like New York, LA, Chicago kind, but Raleigh, bigger city, Wilmington, North Carolina. But being able to go out in the counties and see how people live out there, I think is fascinating. And that a lot of people don't pay them any mind. They don't go out there themselves to see things. So to be able to go back and bring images back from how people live in rural life, I think that's always intrigued me. And just seeing that around our country, different, YouTube channels and things that will go out to kind of the poorest parts of the countries or the most rural parts of the countries, that's always like really fascinated me. So telling those stories that you have to travel to get to, and that people that think they don't have a voice and you can help them have that voice and get their word out there. That's always been an inspiration to me.
That's awesome. What are some of your favorite stories?
Really, docs. Really, Grizzly Man is a great one. I just love seeing someone out in nature, by themselves, basically, or with a really small crew, and just trying to fight the elements and still tell a story. So really, any kind of nature documentaries or movies, Into the Wild, that's a great movie too, based on a real story, a true story. I have to think of some more. I love a lot of old music documentaries too.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of any titles specifically, but yeah, really
Oh,
like
you're good.
nature documentaries is really inspirational to me, or just personal triumph. Someone doing like an ultra marathon, and just that battle and being with them through that whole experience. Things like that, I think, are really inspiring.
I like that you brought up the music because for me, I feel like music is one of the most emotional, like it just grabs you. It's one of the most emotional forms of storytelling to me. And as a video editor, more than a videographer, as a video editor, I find that I can tell a completely like it just changes everything so drastically from like the slightest shift in a song. It changes so drastically. Like you can think two songs are so similar, and then you put them in an edit, and they're telling two wildly different stories. And this is one of those things I've been telling you in our monthly Farm Bureau video calls, is that I just love your music choice. It's so out of the ordinary. It's definitely not something I would envision a Farm Bureau video being edited to, but it adds so much to it, and I argue it's better than the standard just find an old country instrumental to put this farmer's, what am I trying to say, organization, production to. Yeah, so for you, I guess the question that I'm trying to get at here is, how do you go about picking the music? What kind of emphasis do you place on music for your stories specifically?
Yeah, no, I share a lot of those thoughts. Really, that is probably the most powerful thing in a story, I think, other than person speaking on camera and what their story is. But track selection is something I do take a lot of time on. I'll take more time on that than shot selection. You can come away with a story with so many shots that may work for a certain part of the story, but that music track, assuming, it's like a one track story, sometimes you pick a few, but assuming that that's going to kind of live throughout the story, and you're always going to come back to that track for certain pauses in the story or nap breaks and things like that, the track selection is crucial. And I don't know how to explain it other than sometimes you just have a feeling for how it would sound. So that tobacco seeding story, for example, that's like high energy. There's a lot of moving parts. Everyone's got a job. Everyone's job relies on the other person's job. So there's people seating trays and then stacking these trays and handing the trays off to someone on a cart that's going to take them and push them out in the water. So it's like a really kind of frenetic pace. So that one was like a jazz track I chose. And it just seemed to like go with it so well. It was like you can almost, like, that's what I hear when I'm watching the story before I even select a track for it. So typically I'll A-roll the package, so I'll have just the interview bites on a timeline, and then I use universal production music and just go down playlists and like just play them simultaneously, just kind of see what fits with it. So, oh my God, sometimes I'll go through like 250 tracks and you're just like, nothing is right. And just like, you hit it. And sometimes in the first 2 seconds, you're just like, nope, 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 nope. So it can be grueling. It can take hours, seriously, to pick the right track for some. And then there's a couple stories I've had recently where just the first playlist I pick, one I did the other day was the first song I tested. I was just like, sometimes I was just like, that's the song for this story, and put it down there and edited it, send it off to, my other people that watch for editorial purposes. And everyone's like, yeah, it works. So it's, and speaking to the emotion of it too, really is just, different, like 60 Minutes, for example, like a journalistic organization like that, they don't use music because they know that it evokes emotion, and they're trying to be, completely, neutral on,
Objective.
yeah, on whatever they're telling. So you really see how you can sway emotion, when you say you see a story on like a sick kid or a sick person, and then that soft piano music creeps in. I mean, everyone knows where it hits you every time. So it can be kind of cheap.
Dude.
And that, I mean, there's ways to go about it that are more tactful, I guess, or you don't want to just get the cheap tears, but sometimes, it just fits, and that's what you use, I guess.
For sure. And I love that you brought up the being tactful about it, because there are times where I've seen those, like the St. Jude's Hospital and like a lot of the the animal adoption centers.
Yeah, Sarah McLachlan
on
arms
YouTube.
Yeah. I mean, they know it.
They'll start out
works.
those YouTube ads.
Yeah.
They'll start out those YouTube ads with like the kid having cancer and the parents crying about it. And I'm not saying that's not a real moment. It absolutely is, and it's it's tragic. Or they'll start out with like the pets, the animals on the side of the road, and somebody picks them up and puts it in their truck, and they're like, "I'll take you to the whatever." And they just have the piano and the cello in the background, and you're like, dude, stop it. Like,
yeah. Well, and that shows you how powerful it is. Like they may be like, we have a 30-second spot to like give this emotional hook. So it's just like, put this track in and we know it'll, you can put anything over it. You can put kids playing at a park and you'll still be well enough.
Yeah. And I have actually used that before, not in a like a salesy way, trying to sell something, but in a more of a cheesy way. So not to take away from the power of it, but in one of my short films, we just for dramatic effect, we had this guy, actually my brother, who was the actor in the film. We were trying to really amplify the fact that he has no friends. He's got nobody. And so we showed him playing at this playground all alone, and he's got nobody, and nobody wants to play with him. And I just put the saddest like track there, and it, for comedic effect, for the fact that we were trying to be funny, it really sold it. And I could have done any music track there, but I really wanted, for that dramatic, just piano. This guy has no friends. He's all alone playing on the playground. It's true, dude. Like, music really, you can drastically change a viewer's feelings about a character just using the music track. And I've done a lot of the short turnaround videos as well, but I really am drawn to the more documentary, really just diving into a story. Let me figure out the best way to I'm not saying the news stories are not done in the best way, but I'm really trying to get into the story, really deep, longer stories. Question for you, not necessarily directly tied to what I was talking about previously, but do you break down the stems? I mean, I don't do this for every project, but sometimes it calls for the stems of a song to be broken down and actually like played around with. I did that a lot for the documentary that I made for Farm Bureau, and you would have never guessed it with the music, but like sometimes I had to take a 2-minute song because it was a great song and I liked this one instrument in there and draw it out to 4 minutes, and different parts became different. I mean, I appreciate those the songs, and then the licensing sites like Universal Productions, which is also what Idaho Farm Bureau uses, that allow you to take out the stems, which are just if I didn't explain it very well, it's the different instruments and the vocals and the bass, the drums, all those different things. Not that you don't know that. Sorry, I'm just if I didn't explain that well enough to the camera. But yeah, do you do that as well?
Yeah, a lot of them have like a vocal track with them, and I'm not necessarily trying to use vocals under, I guess, like a short doc, if that's what you'd call what we do. So
Yeah.
yeah, getting a lot of instrumental tracks. As far as once you get to instrumentals, I don't know that they have it to where you can break down the stems and take out individual instruments. What I do know about that, and I've thought about wondering if I should change to a site where I can do that. I don't really run into a lot where I feel like I need to take stuff out, except xylophones. I don't know why. Every time I pick out a song and there's xylophone, I tap to the next one. I cannot. There's certain things like that that for me that I'm like that track is, it's on the do not listen to list. But there could be other part. It could have had a 20-second intro I really liked for the story, and then I hear this cling cling come in. This just as an example too. So if I could strip that out, I could see why that would be very useful. But right now, really, I'm probably stripping vocals, if anything, and just using instrumental versions of a song that I like.
So, was there a moment when you realized that you weren't just a videographer, you were telling these really powerful stories? Or was it more kind of like, yeah, I've always kind of known that? Or was it more of a gradual thing? What was that like for
Yeah,
you?
I think gradual, really, and then seeing the impact that it has on people. Uh, some of the like, I don't know if favorite's the right word, most fulfilling has been after hurricane coverage, because we get a lot of hurricanes in North Carolina. So working in news, that was some of the biggest assignments you'll get. But just documenting what hurricanes do to the coast, what they do to the people living there, how many people it can displace, and again, giving those people a voice so they're not forgotten, and kind of the plight that they're going through. And like our most recent one we covered here was Hurricane Helene, which was largely a mountain storm. It didn't affect our coast. And this is, I guess, 18 months later ish. And there's people who still, they'll never see the landscape look the same in their lifetime. So it's really devastating. And being able to go out there and visit them and show people that, an area that is not highly traveled or visited a lot, but just bringing attention to that there's people out there struggling that have lost generational farms or farmland, or just the landscape that they see every day is just, it'll never be the same. So those are important stories, and those are really fulfilling. Like to be able to provide images and video to like governmental organizations like USDA will ask for our stuff a lot, so they can show people in Congress like why they need funding for a specific area. So to say that you had gone out there to, one of the most worst hit spots and then provided these like powerful, like damaged images that they can show, like, we need funding for this area. Like we cannot sustain our operation here or help feed people around us because of the crops we grew. So to be able to play a small part in that is also really important, I think.
I hadn't necessarily thought about that for your state in particular, but yeah, you're so right. You guys are out there on the coast. Because we don't, we're pretty landlocked here in Idaho, but we deal with a lot more like economic changes, and as far as like the yearly, like annual weather changes, whether we got a good winter or a bad one. We got a really bad one this year so far. But that is, I mean, you guys get all that and these natural disasters. I mean, we get hail and stuff like that, but like, I cannot imagine trying to deal with hurricanes. A lot of the stuff that I've found that we do through Farm Bureau that comes across as more, I don't know if interesting is the right word, just when you can show the real struggles of a farmer. And I think that's some of the best stuff that we can have them tell the general public, is that it's not just a piece of cake. We're not going out there trying to poison your food. All of these things that they get accused of, and it's hard, and it makes their lives a lot harder when, anyways, all this stuff is happening. When the farmers can tell that part of their lives, like, dude, right now, I don't know the numbers. I'm going to butcher the numbers, but a couple months ago, the numbers were in Idaho, it costs like like $2 or $8 and an acre to plant a potato or something like that, and they're making like they can sell that same acre for $2 at the end of the season. Like they're just losing tons of money. All of these things that you wouldn't know unless the farmers would tell their stories, and then we help distribute those stories.
That reminds me though of a story that we did with a cotton farmer a year or so ago, and she was talking about they get the same price per bushel, I guess is how they sell it, that they did since like the 80s, like the early 80s, maybe even late 70s. But that's still the commodity price they're getting when they sell their cotton today. And like, I don't know who else could go on not having a raise in 45, 50 years and still sustain their operation. But they do it because it's been in the family for, over 100 years. And it's just the pride in it. So that's, you're just built of something different if you can go on and keep doing that.
Yeah, I do find it really inspiring to hear that these people are like fifth generation farmers. Like I chose a career path that is totally atypical to everything in my area, everything that my whole family did. I mean, there's things that I can relate to with certain family members of being like in marketing or other creative avenues. But as far as like my dad worked on a dairy, he does a very industrial job now. He's the manager of that job, but he's done some really awesome things. His dad was a farmer. His dad was a farmer. It's inspiring to see that these family members that I don't know are the ones that have built this for our family, and I enjoy doing it. I enjoy being out in the middle of nowhere and raising my kids in this lifestyle and teaching them hard work, and I want to keep that going. Like I personally cannot relate to a lot of those things because I want to build something for myself that's completely separate from everybody else. But for them, they're still telling something. They're telling me something as the interviewer. Even if I don't relate to them at every level, I can feel their love for their craft, and I can feel their passion for what they do. And I want to share that more than anything else. Like I want to help them share that. I find that really inspiring. So I don't know if I'm sure I had an agenda with that rant. I'm sure I had a point to that, but I've distracted myself and
I feel the same
over-ranted.
way. I mean, it's awesome that they invite us into their lives, really, and on their land and in their homes and bring their family out. It's, it takes something to do that and to want your story to be told. So it does feel, I mean, you feel included in that world, even if you don't directly work in ag. Just being able to tell that story in a tasteful way and a respectful way to them and their family, they just always make you feel included in that world, I think.
Have you ever had a time where you showed up to film the thing and everything went wrong, but it actually turned out better than the original plan?
Yeah, and I don't know as so much as things were going wrong, but just going in to tell one story and then have something different happen is kind of crazy. There was one, this was working in news, so not agricultural related. We went to a church in, I think, Fayetteville, North Carolina, and they had just had a New Year's Eve service. And this was about 6 months after Charleston church shooting in 2015. I'm not sure if you remember that, but there was quite a few people killed there. And then this 6 months later, we did this story where a guy walked in to the church with a gun. We weren't there when it happened, but he walked into a New Year's Eve service with a gun when they were having a church service, and everyone, that's fresh on everyone's mind. So they're like, this is crazy. What are his intentions and all this? Anyway, it turned out good. Nothing happened. He surrendered his gun over to the preacher, but we had caught wind of that part of the story. So we went out to tell that story the next day, me and a reporter, and we were just interviewing the preacher in an empty church just about what had happened, a night or two before. And that gunman, the guy came in while we were interviewing the dude, and I was rolling because we were actively talking. So he points it out. He's like, "There's the young man now." And the guy came in and he was just like, gave him a big hug, and he was like, "I'm so sorry." And I guess he had, a lot of mental problems, and he had been in the military, I think. But that was one of those, you go
Hmm.
to tell the story and then you can't imagine that it turns into, you know, the guy who had freaked out this whole congregation walks in while we're doing the interview. And then that really became the story. So that one was kind of crazy.
And I'm sure you guys were a little nervous too. You're like, what the heck? Like, but you're right. Like that totally, I'm sure that totally changed the trajectory of what you guys were saying, or sorry, of how you guys told the story afterwards.
Yeah, it was different. I mean, you still kind of give the nuts and bolts, but then now it's this kind of reunion and forgiveness instead of just a scary incident at a church.
Wow. And you get to see a little bit more of that guy's transformation too. Instead of you guys just saying he came to do something bad and he ended up deciding not to and now he's good. Not saying that's what you would have said, but instead of maybe that potentially being one of the narratives of that story, you guys could literally like in real time see a bit of his transformation. Like that is so powerful. That is so cool.
Yeah, those are the ones that keep you doing it or that really stick with you. You know, I mean, in the year to year grind, like we're doing dozens of stories because we're just doing these kind of shorter form pieces. But yeah, those ones, the people stories and the, you know, transformational kind of stories, those are the ones that really stick with you.
What is it that you think makes a story stick with you long after it's over? I've asked a lot of people this question, and I'm always interested with just the diversity of answers that I get. So, what is it that makes a story stick with you long after it's over?
Being relatable, like having a relatable story, and for me at least, just showing the mundane, you know, things that everyone sees or does in their day to day life. I think um, that kind of sticks with you. Having an emotional hook really especially helps. And uh, using the farm example again, we really like you have these stories we do year in and year out, and we've been trying to make it a conscious effort to not just go through the nuts and bolts history of the farm because it all does kind of start to run together and sound the same. So really, again, going to that question, like, why do you do it? And really getting into someone's psyche about how it makes them feel, um, the emotion that they put behind their work and things that can help a story stick. And then also just production wise in the edit too. I mean, you gave the example of the tobacco seeding story, and I feel like that was in an edit because it was just a really quick, fast paced edit. And sometimes those are the stories I remember too, is like you'll have a flash frame of like a certain framing, or like, I like how you did that interview, or I remember, you know, all these quick cuts and that music. So an edit too can make a story memorable for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I've had several times where and again I should come more prepared with examples, but I'm just remembering the feeling of when it happened, but I'm not exactly remembering the instances. But I've had times where I film a story, come back, I'm editing it, and then I'm like, this would actually, if I totally shifted directions, this would turn into something. I don't know if, I mean, better is a subjective term, but I thought it turned out better with some of the changes that I made. What is it that inspires you as a creative?
I think watching other people's work really, and I mean, I watch a lot of YouTube, but I watch a lot of stuff similar to what I do, and then kind of the group calls that we do monthly, seeing other people's work that are in a similar field or have similar interests as far as rural life or shorter form documentaries and things like that. And you can kind of pick up little tips and tricks that you see in their stories, and uh, you know, maybe add a few things to yours that you don't normally do. Another thing too is watching. I mean, we all like new gear, flashy gear, and things like that, and watch all these gear reviews and technical videos and things like that. And sometimes
Oh yeah.
I get like so wrapped up in that world that after like a couple hours, I'm like, I have to step back and remind myself, like, you know how to shoot, you know how to capture clean audio, like just boil it down to like the most basic form again. Whenever you keep thinking like, dang, I have to have that to make my story look better, or like, we have to, you know, work this in the budget so I can get this, like, just your subject is still going to be your story at the end of the day. So if you can find good subjects and have good conversations, like if you've done, produced good enough stories you're happy with, like just boil it down to that basic form and you know how to tell a story. But it is good to stay up with current trends and things and tools that may help you tell your story better. But just always stay grounded and in the basics, I think is what I'm trying to say.
No, absolutely, and that makes total sense. I am the exact same way. I watch too many YouTube videos. I've bought too many pieces of gear that just sit on my shelf and don't get used. Trying to think of a good example right now. Oh, I bought these. I bought this HDMI transmitter system because I was like, yeah, this is going to be great if I do any work where I need like a director's monitor, or I can just have a separate little iPad with the other one like attached to it so that I don't have to have everybody looking over my shoulder to see the monitor. I'm like, this is going to be great. Or if I have to wirelessly send video feed for, I don't know, a convention or something, if I'm doing a screen, I've thought of all these scenarios that I could use it instead of, do I really need it? The answer is no. I've used it about 3 times since I bought it like 4 months ago. Anyways, it's a great thing to have. And I find myself, I heard this rule of thumb. I definitely didn't come up with this. I'm not that smart, but I heard this rule of thumb on somebody's YouTube video. Before you buy something, do it one time without and determine if you really need that thing. Or so, anyways, they said before you buy something, make sure you need it instead of trying to find something to use it for.
Oh,
And
sure.
that's
No, that
definitely,
makes sense.
I'm so guilty of that. I'm like, oh, if I had this new microphone wireless system, I could do all of this stuff.
I'm the same with a gimbal. I've got probably 6 months ago, and I think I've used one time because there's like 2 shoots per year that are kind of like commercial type, promo type shoots we do, where I just kind of want that stabilization of a gimbal. But every time I think about practically using it on a shoot, I don't take the time because it's switch camera, level it off. Then you're kind of limited in your focal range, and to me, a lot of the shots kind of look the same, really. So yeah, gimbal, that's what I'm guilty of, is buying this new flashy gimbal, and then I'm like, dang, I use it practically on a shoot.
A hot take that I have on gimbals is that they're actually way overrated. I bought one like 3 or 4 years ago, and it was the only thing I shot on for like 2 years. And then eventually I started doing some handheld stuff because just like you, I found that I didn't like that every time I tried to zoom in or zoom out, it would make everything shake, and it shifted the balance of the camera and on the gimbal and everything. And I also couldn't have an external monitor as easily. I mean, you can mount one to a gimbal and do all this different stuff. And then I started getting into these cameras where I need an external battery, and that doesn't work as easily on it. As easily, you can still figure it out. It doesn't work as easily on a gimbal. But then I started shooting that way because I'm like, you know what? I have all this stuff. I'm just going to shoot handheld. And I started falling in love with shooting handheld and having a little bit of a heavier rig, but not needing to rely. Anyways, I love the shots of handheld a lot more than I love those perfectly stable. And I still have a use for a gimbal 1/10 of the time now, but not nearly as much
Exactly. Yeah,
anymore.
there's cases for it, and sometimes you do need it. But yeah, 98% of the time, I'm a tripod or handheld, or I've told you about that sack thing that you kind of set it on to stabilize, so you still get
Yes.
kind of the handheld look. It's like stabilized handheld, if that makes sense. Like you don't see the
Uh-huh.
jitters, but you can still see the frame edges kind of moving a little.
Yeah, exactly. And I said 1/10 of the time, but now that I'm thinking about it, I have not pulled out my gimbal in probably, it's just on my shelf right here, in probably almost 8 months. I never use that thing anymore, dude. I should probably sell it and just rent when I need it or use somebody
I'll say
else's.
that's when you'll need it. The moment you get rid of it, you'll have a shoot that calls for a gimbal. So.
That's what I'm worried about. Yeah, I buy all this gear and I never use a lot of it, and then I'm like, I'm just gonna sell it. But then once I sell it, I probably need it. Yeah.
Touching on gear really quick, just while you're talking about that, a drone too. I mean, talk about like a
Dude,
useful
yes.
tool on a farm and needing that for like establishing shots and certain things. But I still try to not be egregious with it. Like, don't put in aerials just to have aerials. Like, again, it's nice to establish something, or if you have like a cool move around like a barn, or even you can use that as your gimbal and like a tracking shot. Like I get tons of walking shots with a drone and things like that, but not putting in the
Yes.
drone just to use the drone. I mean, they look just as good at 50 feet as 400. So there's many ways to use it for sure.
I remember when they started becoming big in video, it was always the very first shot, and then you'd use it 4 or 5 or 10 more times within the video. A lot of the times, actually, I don't fly the drone whenever we go out and do these farm stories. My supervisor, Joel, actually takes the drone up, and I do all of the groundwork, and I like that system. But I don't know, I do think drones are a tool to be had, and when they first came out, the trend was, oh, use the drone, like the drone is the coolest dang thing, and for a lot of people that we film with, they're like, oh, you have a drone, you should get it up. And I'm like, sure, let's do it. I'd love to get the drone up and film your operation and film you guys farming and whatever. But for me as a storyteller, I know that it's just a tool that I'm only going to use in the edit when it's is necessary. So yeah, I totally agree with
Yeah,
that.
it's hard to
So
get details, really. I mean, detail shots, I think, are the most important. Those are the most memorable shots of a story. It can be the hands on
yeah,
something, or like, really tight in on the face, like focused in on something. And yeah, the drone a lot of times on a farm can just be like a scene setter and then just cut to the
yep.
ground stuff, really.
Exactly, exactly. There has been 1 or 2 times where I specifically needed a drone to get to a part of a farm that I couldn't get to, and those times it was really handy. But yeah, the rest of the times I use it as and sometimes I've actually done stories where I don't even use the drone. Sometimes it's not even necessary. But yeah, a lot of the other times I've just used it as an establishing shot and then maybe like an ending shot, maybe. But I definitely try to steer away from doing something just because I've always done it. I'm not saying I'm perfect. Definitely not perfect by any means, but
Well, no,
yeah,
you
that's
learn
definitely.
from what, starts to bug you. And I think that's why things kind of ebb and flow. Like I do things different than I did 2 years ago, but I may
Mm,
rediscover it again in 2 years. And it's from watching your own stuff and saying like, God, I always do that. I need to, and that could be something
yeah,
with drone, like just slapping drone in like where it's not really necessary. And I'm like, I could have gotten something much more creative, like a tight detail shot on the ground. And like for me right now, I'm like, that's what I would rather be looking at than some, just wide image with no detail. It's just farmland and a sky on a drone. So
exactly, exactly. And I actually, just for my personal use, I recently bought a 360 camera from Insta360, and so it is. I mean, it is so cool. I don't know how I've never gotten involved with the world of 8K like 360 video before because it is freaking sick. I gave it to my brother. When they went up snowmobiling the other day, and he just put that on the front of his snowmobile, and then he also put it on my dad's helmet and everything, and like the angles that like you put it in one spot, and then the angles are limitless. Like you can see all around, and I'm sure I'm going to abuse that for a little bit here with farming because I'm thinking of like putting it on the end of a planter, putting it in a chicken coop, putting it in a cow pen, like doing all these different things, maybe attaching it to an animal or to a tractor or like all this different stuff or to somebody as they're doing this different stuff within agriculture. And I'm sure I'm gonna abuse that because I'm just diving into it barely in these last few weeks. But eventually, it's gonna become okay. When is that necessary? When is that tool called for? And maybe in 6 months I'll go
but
away from never using it
that's what you got
again
to figure out.
for
I
a
mean,
second.
use it to death when you first get it, and then figure out what you like and you don't like. And sometimes you do need
Exactly.
new tools or equipment just to spark like another interest or keep you motivated. Again, I know if like every couple of years when they let me
Absolutely.
upgrade the drone and whatever technology's changed on it, I'll just get like super excited to use it again because the new, I don't know, focal lengths on the lens, for example, or like now there's
Mm.
this many megapixels. And I mean, the still images are what has come like the longest way for me. Like doing drone still images is like, I like doing that more than the video, I think.
Ooh, I got a good closing question for you here, or one of the last questions. What's a story that you haven't told yet, but you really want to?
Uh, I do have one in mind for this because we've talked about it for years. And again, specifically to the farm world, but it really would be kind of like a just great human piece for anyone to watch, I think, is following migrant workers back to their home countries So to kind of be with them in the fields here and see how hard it is, how, the work they do day in and day out, and the places they live and things here, but then the money that they make here that they can use in their country that they send back to their families and friends and just help everybody to live back there. I think that would be incredible to go back somewhere in Mexico or Central America or something like that to tell that story. But security has kind of been a thing. Our organization has said we could do it. So security is one, and then finding the time to do it is another. But I just think that could be the most powerful piece. And I mean, it would center around agriculture, but I think the way I would want to shoot it or tell it would be the family aspect. So, because then you just get back to that relatability, and everyone can relate to helping family and stuff.
Ooh, and what a good human interest piece I'm sure that will be. Yeah. What is a story you're most proud of telling? What is a piece you're most proud of? It could be a couple too, if it's not just
Yeah,
one. But
no, and not even just one piece, I guess a series of it, which I know I touched on, but the Hurricane Helene stuff and the farming impacts that had, that one has been the most fulfilling, I think, since I've been here, and maybe just in my career in general. But knowing the relationships we made with these people to come 4 and 5 hours out of our way right after this storm, just to show how their area that they've lived in their entire lives looks completely different and will never look the same. To have been able to document that and let those people, or have them let us into their homes and lives, that was probably the most fulfilling, favorite stuff I've done here.
that's awesome. How did that come to be from start to finish? Was that something that you guys, as the Farm Bureau of North Carolina, was that something you, as soon as it was happening, you knew you wanted to do a piece, or was it more of a request, or was
No,
it?
we all knew we wanted to. The three that I work with, that I've mentioned throughout this, we all have a TV news background, and we all worked at the same station before Farm Bureau, so we kind of had a rapport already, and we just have, I don't know, those the news background. Like, you just know once disaster hits, like, you feel like you need to document that. And so we know now that it's the agricultural angle of things. But I remember right after it happened, I think management didn't necessarily want us to go out there because they didn't know, like, the danger, like how dangerous and what it looked like and if we would be in the way and everything like that. But all of us having experience in covering natural disasters and things like that, we like felt like we were pushing for it day in and day out. So I think we went like a week after it happened, but got a great series of stories, and then continued to follow it every month for a year, or 13, 14 months. We went back out and told stories to see how people are getting along, just to keep it fresh on people's minds that it's still an issue.
So wrapping up here, what's the most real moment you've ever captured on camera? Was it that moment in the church with that guy coming in, or has there been another moment that?
That probably was it. And that, and I'm trying to think of something else to not just fall back on that. There was another one in news for, and again, it was storm coverage, post storm coverage, and these rivers had just crested and just washed out. The bottom of like an overpass, there's like that kind of angle up, and a lot of times you'll see like homeless camps and things down there. If there's like a concrete angle, and then there's like some sand and it goes down to the river. At least out east here, we see a lot of that. But the river's crested to over the bridge, so it just washed out homeless camps. And we were doing live shots out there, in Anchor and myself. And one of the women came up who had just gotten washed out of there, and he spoke with her and asked her experience. And all she had was like the bike she had and like the clothes on her back. So we each had like a bag, like a go bag of clothes and things. And I remember giving her like socks and a t-shirt, and the guy I was with gave her some money and stuff. So those are those real moments where you're out there covering something, but you're also like, that's still a person that needs something and just lost the little bit of what they did have. So you still try to help them as a human, and we're not just there to like show devastation and things like that. You still want to legitimately help. And usually that's just by the video and images you're going to bring back. Like I mentioned earlier, being able to share those with, I don't know, counties, cities, even federal government organizations, and show hotspots that need help. But if there's anything you can do in real time, like you should still be a human and help out your fellow person. So
Dude, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It's been a pleasure. It's been a lot of fun talking to you. And I love having conversations with like-minded people. I really do. And I knew for a while, I was like, I got to have Mark on the podcast. So I really appreciate you coming on. I'm
thanks for
excited
asking.
to
Yeah,
get
hope
this
we
one out.
get together in person sometime and do the same. So
Dude, I know. I'm excited for, is it in August? Is that when we're going to New Orleans?
yeah,
For AFBF,
yeah,
American
that's
Farm
right.
Bureau? Cool.
Yep.
Sick. Can't wait, dude.